Hi, I'm Mrs. Ladwig, and I'm going to be reading to you from a book called Cilla Lee Jenkins, Future Author Extraordinaire.
Says Mrs. Jenkins.
First, a very important letter from the author. Dear reader, before I tell you my story, we need to talk about time machines. Specifically, I was hoping you might have one. And if you do, I have a big favor to ask. My name is Priscilla Lee Jenkins, and I'm destined for greatness as a future author extraordinaire. My only problem is that Priscilla is a terrible name. And have you ever seen a book with a Lee Jenkins on the cover? I didn't think so. So I need someone with a time machine to travel back 8.5 years to the day I was born and make sure I get a name that'll grab people's attention. Like Ruby because it's pretty, or Claudia because it's cool, or Supernova because supernovas are bright and shiny and big. I also need one last name, something like Smith or Lilac or Hemingway. I can tell you exactly where to aim your time machines. I was born at 12:04 a.m. on a holiday called Labor Day. My mom says this is just like me with a real literal streak, quote unquote. She says this means I take things at face value, though I don't quite understand because I don't think values can have faces. Anyway, my point is that holidays are easy to find in the calendar, so getting to the night I was born won't be hard. But then comes the tricky part. You have to steal my birth certificate and change my name without anyone in my family seeing. This will be hard because the night I was born was very unusual, and not just because I was coming into the world ready for a life of literary greatness. The night I was born is also the only time my whole family, me, my mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa Jenkins, and my Nai Nai and Yi Yi, which are Chinese for grandmother and grandfather, has ever been together in the same room. So be careful, that's a lot of people to look out for. You'll have to be extra sneaky. You'll also have to be fast because the baby in my mom's stomach is already getting kind of big. It's going to be normal and boring, not destined for greatness like me, which is one of the many reasons I've decided I won't like it. My parents say it's okay to be nervous, and my grandma and grandpa Jenkins gave me this journal because they say writing about it will help me understand my feelings. But I already understand my feelings. I don't want to be a big sister. I like my family the way it is now. And my best friend Colleen says that when new babies come, they're all the adults want to talk about. Also, she says that they come with things called responsibilities, which means I'll have to be quiet when the baby is sleeping and only hold it when I'm sitting on the couch with a pillow under me. Colleen has 2 little brothers, which means that she's been through this a lot, and it doesn't sound fun at all. So I've decided to take action. I'm going to write my first ever book right here in this journal, and I'm going to become a famous best-selling author with an excellent new name before the baby is born. Then no one can forget about me. Also, maybe then my parents will let me name the baby, which they say is not going to happen. My dad once told me that authors should write what they know, but that seemed like terrible advice because I've never known a dragon, and dragons are some of the most exciting things you can write about. But now that I need to write my book before the baby gets here, I can see his point. Most of the best stories I know are about things that have happened to me. So this story will be about the thing I know best, me, Priscilla Lee Jenkins. I'm very excited to write the story of my life. It's a great story with excellent characters and struggles and plot twists. Also, there's lots of drama, so I think my book will definitely be a bestseller. Plus, you'll get to hear all about my destiny as a future author and how it makes me much better than a new baby. Which means that once I'm famous, you'll already know who the real Priscilla or Claudia or Sparkle Dust was as a child. I kind of hoped that before I even finished this letter, some time-traveling reader would have already taken action, and I suddenly realized my name is something amazing, like Supernova Hemingway. But I think I'm still Priscilla, which means it hasn't worked yet. So while I wait, I resign myself to Cilla for short, and I'll start my story as your friend and maybe a new favorite author, Cilla Lee Jenkins, future author extraordinaire. P.S. Isn't that a great word, resigned? It means you've given up, but with dignity, and only after a long and tortuous struggle. There are lots of long and tortuous struggles in a world that lets parents name their child Priscilla Lee Jenkins. Also in a world that insists flying pigs aren't real. They're out there somewhere, I know it. Probably hiding with all the people with time machines. And here is a picture of Cilla. Chapter 1. Families and the Forces of Darkness. I'll start by introducing my family, since lots of my stories have them in it. Also, they're pretty great. There's me, who you know, my mom and dad. Then there are my mom's parents, my grandma and grandpa Jenkins. They live in a big house with black shutters on top of a tall hill that's fun to roll down. I see them most Saturdays mornings for brunch, and Thursdays when Grandpa Jenkins picks me up from school because my parents have to work late. I like Thursdays. Grandpa Jenkins takes me to the park, and sometimes we get hot fudge sundaes, but we don't tell my parents or Grandma Jenkins. My dad's parents, my Nai and Yee, also live very close to us. They live in an apartment in a tall brick building, and I see them every Wednesday, which is the night that my parents go out to dinner. On Wednesdays, my Nai picks me up from school, and we go shopping in Chinatown. I love Chinatown. There are so many good smells and new foods there, and my Nai's friends always pat my cheek and give me candy. Plus, the grocery store owner keeps a jar at the counter with 2 tiny turtles inside, who I've named Green Eggs and Ham, and who I'll take home as pets someday, I've decided. I love my family just the way they are now, with no new baby on the way. In fact, when I told my mom this morning at breakfast that I was writing my book, I said not wanting a new baby was going to be a big theme. And themes are things that happen again and again, like when you put your fingers through the small holes in the fence outside and they get stuck. Then your mom has to use soap to get them out, and she says, "Why did you do that?" This happens every time, which means if something's a theme, it happens a lot. Here's my family tree. Hopefully you can see this.
And then we're going to do our calendar. Alright, let me find.
My mom liked the idea of my book so much that she giggled and said that she couldn't wait to read the story of my life. She didn't giggle when I told her about its theme, though, and put her arm around my shoulders and said, "Cilla, sweetheart, I know it's a lot to get used to. If there's anything you want to talk about, I'm always here." This was convenient because I actually did want to talk about something, which was, could we please get Choco Rex cereal instead of just cornflakes? Because our no sugary cereal rule is silly, and Choco Rex has marshmallows shaped like dinosaurs and turns regular milk into chocolate milk inside the bowl. My mom didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She just blinked and looked kind of confused, so I think there's hope. But back to my family. Having my grandparents so close is great because it means I have 6 people to take care of me and play with me and hear my stories all the time. Plus, I get 6 of everything, like birthday gifts and cookies and hugs when I scrape myself. Of course, I also have 6 people who don't hesitate to say, "Priscilla Lee Jenkins, what are you doing, young lady?" And recently, 6 people saying, "So are you excited to be a big sister?" The answer is no. But it also means that in very, very difficult situations, I have 6 family members to help me. Like when I had to deal with the forces of darkness, which when I was little, I was sure lived in my closet. See, I don't like closets. I'm not afraid of them anymore now that I'm 8.5. But on nights like tonight, when I'm lying in bed writing because I can't fall asleep, and the dark is sometimes scary, I have to admit that I still think they're highly suspicious. Why build a small room just for your clothes? Why hang your clothes up when they're so much easier to find in piles on your floor? This is just asking for trouble. If you build a small dark room and then put a door in front of it, Whatever it's hiding isn't going to be very nice. Looking at my closet door, it's easy to remember how scared I felt when I was little. Because when my parents said goodnight and the light turned off, I knew there were monsters in my closet waiting. I imagined big slimy monsters with tails and horns and smelly feet. I imagined tiny monsters no higher than my socks. And I'd call for my mom and dad because even small monsters are scary. My mom would say, Cilla, there are no such things as monsters. And my dad would open the closet and say, see, monster free, feel better now? But the answer was no, because everyone knows that monsters learn to hide themselves when they're in monster school. My parents would kiss me on the cheek and leave. I'd lie waiting, and then something would rustle, or I'd imagine something had rustled or was about to rustle. So I'd call my parents and begin the whole thing all over again, night after night, and nothing they could say or do would make me feel any better. Which is when my grandparents got involved. Monsters in the closet, my grandma Jenkins said, putting her hands on her hips and frowning. Nonsense, you should just let her be, she said, turning to my mom. But my mom didn't like that idea. My nai said there are no such things as monsters, such an imagination. She made a noise and shook her head. And even my grandpa Jenkins, who my grandma says will believe anything, which means he's the best kind of reader there is, told me, you know, the monsters are just made up. Like all your other stories. Hey, maybe you could make up a story about your monsters and imagine that they're friendly. But this wasn't helpful either because monsters are serious business. You can't just control them with a story, and monsters are not friendly. These people. Which is when my Yi invited me over with him to run errands, which I sometimes do because I like to hear his stories, and because he needs my help picking out new ties. Never green. Sometimes blue, polka dots, always a plus. But that day, Yi didn't drive us to the tie shop or the bookstore or the tailor or any of the places we usually go. Instead, we went to a big store with frames and mirrors everywhere and over to a wall filled with metal poster racks. So Cilla, Yi said, you are having trouble with monsters. I know, I sighed. They aren't real, I'm being silly. There's no such thing. Well, Yi interrupted me, but nicely. I don't know for sure. Really? I looked at him, eyes wide. Really? Yi shrugged. Monsters are tricky. So I have an idea, just in case there are bad things. Slimy things, I added. Smelly things, he asked. Yes, I confirmed, with big feet. Well, just in case there are any slimy, scaly, big feet monsters, we can do something to fight back. Maybe he flipped through the rack and held up a poster. This one? And there was a picture of a unicorn, big and bright and standing by a purple forest. It's beautiful, I gasped. Well, Yi said, we'll get it and frame it, and it will hang on my closet door, I said, finally understanding. Then, Yi went on, if there are monsters, the unicorn will fight them off, I cried. Exactly, he said, using its magical horn. And the powers of the moon, I exclaimed. And the stars, he added. To send the forces of darkness back into the closet, I finished triumphantly. My Yi smiled, mussing my hair, so smart. So Yi and I got a sparkly silver frame for the poster. Then we went home and hung my unicorn right smack dab on the closet door. Here's the unicorn picture. High enough to catch tall monsters, low enough to catch tiny ones, we were expert monster hunters by this point. Then we celebrated with ice cream. Every night after that, when my parents tucked me in and said goodnight, my unicorn took care of anything that came her way. And that's the story of how I, Cilla Lee Jenkins, discovered that I have the best Yi ever. One who understands the power of unicorns and also the importance of taking action when dealing with the forces of darkness, even if they're probably not there. And even though every once in a long while, I still ask my dad to check the closet before I go to sleep. You'll be pleased to know that I don't believe in monsters anymore, but I definitely believe in unicorns.
All right, I mean, looks perfect. We're gonna do our words.
Good morning. We are reading Chapter 2 of Cilla Lee Jenkins, Future Author Extraordinaire. And Chapter 2 is Babies, Baldness, and Other Struggles. I saw a picture of the baby today. It's black and white and looks like a bunch of dark circles smushed together. I've decided to call it the blob. My parents were excited to show me the picture and to tell me that it's a girl. I don't know why they think this will make a difference, though it does help with name ideas. Maybe the sister from the Black Lagoon. My mom kept telling me that she wishes she had a sister instead of just older brothers, and my dad kept saying that he has a little sister too, who is my Auntie Eva. But that's totally different because Auntie Eva is nice and tells funny jokes and can drive and takes me bowling when she comes to visit, and the new baby isn't going to do any of those things. So I don't know why they thought that would help. They also kept saying things like, "Do you want me to tell you about it and want to take a closer look?" Even though I kept saying no because the picture was boring. Plus, I don't care. My grandma and grandpa Jenkins came over in the morning to see the picture and brought coffee cake to celebrate. And then my Nina, maybe, and Yee came over in the afternoon and brought red bean cupcakes and almond cookies because now she's having a baby. My mom wants to eat almond cookies all the time. This is mostly great because when she eats almond cookies, I eat them too. Though they used to be my favorite and are now also the blob's favorite apparently, which doesn't seem fair. After everyone left, my mom put the picture of the blob on the refrigerator in case anyone wants to take a closer look later, which is ridiculous because who wants to look at that? Also, we don't need anything else on the refrigerator. It's already decorated with the picture I drew in class last week. I call it Dragons Dancing in Tiaras, and my dad said it's certainly original and one of the most creative works of art yet. While my mom hung the photo, my dad sat on the couch with me and said, "Cilla Jenkins, your mom and I are so proud of the way you've been helping us get ready for the baby. I know you're going to be a great big sister." And even though I knew I was supposed to say, "Thank you, Daddy, I can't wait," what I really wanted to say was, "But it's it's a giant blob, and why is it shaped so funny? And is that what it's going to look like when it comes out of Mama's stomach? Because that's gross." So I didn't say anything. I just put my head on my dad's shoulder, and he put his arm around me and cuddled, which is always nice. He said he was excited to read my book, and he asked if I wanted to talk about anything. And I think that my case for Choco Rex cereal is getting better, because when I finished, he said, "Oh, Cilla, there's never a dull moment," which means I did an excellent job with my argument because boring is the worst thing to be. Now my mom is napping because the blob makes her tired all the time. My dad's putting the blob script together, and even though he said I could keep him company, he's changed his mind and wants me to play by myself for a while. Apparently it's not helpful when I put a baby sock on my nose and run around pretending to be an elephant. But at least he said I could have another red bean cupcake if I promised not to make noise and sat at the kitchen table while I ate and tried not to get crumbs everywhere. I'm doing an excellent job, by the way. I'm putting all my crumbs in a big pile at the corner of the table so they're not everywhere at all, just in one place. While I'm here, I thought I'd write more of my best-selling life story because even though the blob doesn't look like much, I need to finish my book and be world famous before it's born, just in case. To be honest, I don't understand why my whole family made such a big deal about the picture. When I first heard about it, I thought at least be able to see the baby's. I thought I'd at least be able to see the baby's face, and if it looked nice, I even thought it might be waving hello, which I'd like because then I'd know it was excited to meet me and happy to be my sister. But it's just sitting there like blobs do. And if it's not excited to meet me, I don't know why I should be excited to meet it. Plus, even though I tell alien-faced McGee that girls are better than boys all the time, I was actually kind of hoping the blob would be a boy because my mom calls me her special girl. And what if she decides the blob's special too? But at least there's one thing I can see from the picture of the blob that I'm happy about, even if the rest of it is very disappointing. From what I can tell, the blob has absolutely positively no hair, which is very good news. You see, I don't remember much or anything about being a baby, but I know there were some things I was very good at. For example, I learned how to talk early on, which isn't surprising from a future best-selling author. And soon after that, I learned about something called quiet time, and that it's not acceptable to do things like wake your mom up screaming her name in the middle of the night, which makes her run down the hallway to your room thinking something's wrong and that you're being kidnapped or dying or eaten by a shark. only to find you standing up in your crib holding on to bars and saying, "Mommy, let's talk." My mom was not happy the one time this happened, which I can understand now, though in my defense I probably did have something interesting to say. My point is that I was an excellent baby, what my Grandpa Jenkins calls a great kid, though sometimes I'm also what he calls a pill, but we won't go into that. But there's one thing that wasn't so great about me as a baby, something you can see in all the photos. For all the greatness and talent inside my head, the outside of my head was a mess. As if being named Priscilla Lee Jenkins wasn't bad enough. When I was little, I was bald, and being bald is a hard way to enter the world. Being bald means people in the park stop your mom and say things like, "What's his name? He's just precious." "You mean the little boy in the green dress?" my mom would answer. The doctor said I'd grow out of it, but the problem didn't go away. By the time I was almost 4, even my grandparents, who think I'm the most beautiful grandchild on earth, were beginning to notice. "Does this happen a lot in America?" my nana asked, looking suspiciously at my mom's hair. Yeah. This is the Chinese way of saying, "My goodness," or "Oh no, she looks like an old man," and my yee said, rubbing my head. She looks like an old man, my yee said, rubbing my head. My Grandma Jenkins started patting my mom's shoulder whenever we came over and saying things like, "Not to worry, dear. She has personality, but I don't know what that has to do with my hair." Of course, I wanted hair, but I was so little that at first I didn't really notice that I was bald and everyone else wasn't. For a long time, I didn't mind it that much. But then the summer when I was 4, which means my head was still mostly bald with a small patch of fuzz around the edges, my cousin Helen came to visit. My cousin Helen's my age, which means that my Grandma Jenkins thinks we should play together and be as thick as thieves. But I don't like playing with Helen because she bosses me around. Plus, I'm not a thief. I'm a future author extraordinaire. Helen lives far away, and every summer her mom and dad send her to spend a whole month with my Grandma and Grandpa Jenkins. While she's here, she goes to special summer camp for kids who play music. I wanted to go to this camp too because I'm excellent at the kazoo, but apparently that doesn't count. When Helen's here, I have to share the playroom, which is usually just for me, and my grandparents always throw her a birthday party with all her friends from the special camp, who makes me feel shy. And as if all this wasn't bad enough, that summer Helen had hair so long it reached below her shoulders. She wore long, light brown braided pigtails that she held together with matching bows, and when she took the bows and the pigtails out, her hair fell into perfect corkscrew curls. This was just too much. Bows and pigtails and curls. When you're bald and your mom is trying to tape a bow to your head because it won't stay on, then and only then will you understand the agony of this terrible injustice. Of course, I didn't blame Helen for having brown curly pigtails. That's not something you can control. But I did, absolutely positively, no question about it, blame her for the princess party. A princess-themed birthday party should be a great thing, and I was excited when I heard that Helen wanted one. Playing princesses is one of the best games out there, especially when Colleen and I played at recess. We take turns being princesses and dragons, and sometimes we even pretend that we're princess dragons, which is an excellent game because you get to wear a crown and breathe fire. I'd invented an amazing princess story, too. My name, I decided, was Katharina Rosalinda Lightning Glass, and I was the princess of a kingdom where everyone rode sparkly blue horses and sometimes grew wings. It was a very good story. I was dressed in my very special princess dress, which was sparkly purple and even had a lacy skirt underneath. When I got to the party, Helen was standing with a group of girls from camp, laughing by the goodie bag table. She was wearing a pink and yellow princess dress, and her hair was braided in pigtails, tied with matching yellow bows. At the top of her head, she wore a beautiful, sparkly silver tiara that clipped onto her hair. "Hi, Cilla," Helen waved when she saw me. She reached over to the goodie bags and took something silver out. "We got crowns for everyone." "Sorry you can't wear yours," she said, making a face and handing the crown to me. Behind her, I could hear her friends giggling. "But your dress is pretty," Helen said, trying to sound encouraging. "We almost match." But then someone called her name, and as Helen and all her friends walked off, I heard one of the girls say, "What kind of princess doesn't have hair?" I watched Helen walk away, her princess dress swishing. I touched my bald head. Even though I was wearing my very special princess dress, I suddenly didn't feel like a princess, and I was sure I didn't look like one. Katharina Rosalinda Lightenglass didn't seem like such a great name anymore either. It even felt a little silly. My bald head would stand out next to all the sparkling tiaras. Unless. And then I was running away from the party. Up the stairs to the playroom, I opened the arts and crafts drawer and pulled out a great big bottle of glue, smearing glue all over the bottom of the tiara. Also my fingers and possibly the floor. I closed my eyes, held the crown high above me, and with a deep breath, squished it down hard, pressing it to my head. Cilla Jenkins, what are you doing? I spun around. My Grandma Jenkins stood in the doorway, and she was not happy. I gave her my best. Who, me? Look. But that wasn't a good strategy, because the tiara slid to the floor, which left a gluey mess across my head and down my dress. Now I know I'm a literary genius with a great and epic future ahead of me. But this was all a little too much, so I burst into tears. I told my grandma the whole story, starting with Katharina Rosalinda Lightenglass, and the wings, and Helen's friends, and the baldness. I think she stopped me somewhere around taking my destiny into my own hands. I probably didn't quite say this since I was 4, but I meant it. So that's what I'm writing here. This is called creative license, which means that if you're an artist, you can change things that happen in real life to make them more interesting. I use it a lot. Come on now, dear. She gave me a hug, or sort of a hug, because the glue was all over me and had smeared more while I cried. Of course you can be a princess. No, I wailed. Princesses aren't bald, and if the tiara won't stay on, I definitely won't be a princess. Also, I have glue on my head, so now I'm going to be funny looking and sticky. My Grandma Jenkins took a long, deep breath, and then my grandma, my no messes, no silliness, no nonsense, young lady, Grandma Jenkins, went over to the arts and crafts drawer, looked through it for a minute, and pulled out a small jar. Well, she said, with a sigh, but also a funny kind of smile at the corner of her mouth, we can do something about that. And so I, Cilla Jenkins, future author extraordinaire, descended the staircase, my grandma behind me, with a head that sparkled, no, dazzled, with glue in the half a jar of glitter Grandma Jenkins had poured over me, plus a few star stickers we found at the bottom of the drawer. Good afternoon, Princess Helen, I said when I reached the bottom of the staircase. Cilla! Helen didn't know what to say. You look like a princess, my grandma suggested. Like Cinderella at the ball, Helen exclaimed, right after her fairy godmother used her magic. And I'll admit it, I realized just then that I liked Helen maybe just a little, though I still think the bows were a bit much. It was a long time before my hair grew to a normal length, though now it's past my shoulders, which is probably the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me other than being destined for literary greatness. But after that day, I didn't worry about it anymore, or at least as much. My mom let me decorate my head with stickers in place of bows, and sometimes for very special occasions she let me draw on my head with markers. But even though being bald wasn't all that bad in the end, when I look at the blob's photo, I can't help but stare very hard at it. In fact, I got up just a minute ago to take a closer look. I had to stand on a chair to reach it, and I put my fingers against it and followed all the lines of the picture. I don't think I saw any hair, though there was one line that looked like it might possibly be the start of a pigtail, which could be awful. So I took destiny into my own hands. Okay, starting chapter 3, My Brush with Destiny, or How I Became a Future Author Extraordinaire. Today on the playground, my best friend Colleen and I talked about what we're going to be when we grow up, which is also known as destiny. Destinies are great things to have because they mean that you already know what you're going to do with your life, and so you don't have to worry about it anymore. This is nice because there's so many other things to worry about, like making friends and being afraid of the dark. Excuse me. Colleen wanted to know all about how I knew I'd be an author, which is fun to tell. She's not sure about her destiny yet, but it'll probably involve robots and space travel. We're both very excited for this because when she's a world-famous astronaut, I'll write stories about her adventures and it'll be amazing. Playing Destinies with Colleen made me realize that there's an important story I haven't told you yet, because the whole point of this book is that I'm a future author extraordinaire. So I should tell you the story of how I found this out before you wonder if we'll ever get to it. It all started one day at the grocery store. My mom was paying the cashier and I was waiting for her by the gumball machine. I'm sorry. I was maybe 5 years old, which means my hair was just past my ears, and I was imagining what would happen if I melted all the gumballs into one giant gumball, and what color it would be and how long it would take to chew, when I was interrupted by a person who can only be described as a rude individual. This is true for several reasons. First, she interrupted me when I was clearly concentrating, which is rude. But what's even worse is that she interrupted me to say, "Oh my goodness, look at you." She bent down next to me, which was not appropriate. We are strangers, so if I'm not supposed to talk to them, it doesn't seem fair that they're allowed to talk to me. "Aren't you something special?" she exclaimed. "What an interesting face you've got there. Those eyes." Now that is rude. If there's one thing that I know in this world, it's that you don't comment on people's faces. Like this woman who had lips that puckered like a fish, and wore bright orange glasses that matched her bright orange hair. And not in a good way. It wouldn't have been appropriate to say something about her face, even when it looked like that, because people take their faces personally, and you don't want to hurt their feelings. That's why when I call Ben McGee Alien Face McGee, I don't do it because his face looks like anything like an alien's. I call him that because I've made up a story about how he's an alien who was sent here to spy on us in human disguise, which means his alien face lurks underneath, waiting to burst forth. Though that's a longer story for later. Anyways, I'm a polite individual, so I didn't tell this woman that talking to strangers and staring at my face and calling it names meant that she was being a rude one. I just didn't look at her and looked instead at my mom, who was trying to get the clerk to hurry. "Who's that?" the woman asked, clearly not good at reading looks. "Is that your mommy? Well, she must be so pleased to have such an unusual daughter. Now, what are you exactly?" The question startled me. It was a big question, and it made me think, what was I? No one had ever asked me this before. I wasn't a Priscilla, that's for sure. I was much more than a Lee Jenkins. I was a daughter and a girl, but lots of people are daughters and girls, so that wasn't enough. I wanted to be something special. I wanted to be something great. And this was my moment, my chance to declare myself to the world, to decide who I was. What was I? Cilla Lee Jenkins. What did I want to be? And then it happened. An answer came bubbling up from deep inside me. I said, breathless with wondrousness of it all, "I'm a future author extraordinaire." I expected a big reaction, as I just realized my destiny of greatness right then and there by the gumball machine. But the rude individual, it turns out, was also not very bright and just looked confused. "No, dear, I mean, what are you?" But then my mom was suddenly there, next to me. "Can I help you?" she said, taking my hand. "I was just asking your fascinating daughter what she was. You don't see like that normally, and you don't see looks like that normally, and I just had to know." Well, you heard her, didn't you? My mom was polite, but her words were careful and clipped so the rude individual would understand. She is a future author extraordinaire. And then my mom said, "Come on, Cilla," in a single songy voice, and we got to the car, and she put me in my car seat and said in a short, funny way, "Well, what a rude individual." And then we went to the ice cream store and got cones with sprinkles. And the very next day I got a present, a sign of my very own to hang outside my bedroom door, which was painted blue and said in big white letters, "Priscilla Lee Jenkins, future author extraordinaire." As I told you, Colleen, today at recess, goes to show you that even though parents can make awful decisions like having blobs and calling me Priscilla and saying that there's not a chance on earth, young lady, that they'll agree to name me Glimmerella, they're not all bad, and sometimes parents get it right. Chapter 4, Preschool Blues. Today, my Nene took me to the craft store. She is making pillows and curtains for the Blob's room and wanted my help choosing the fabric. The Blob is going to have the small room across from mine, which we used before to hold books. So far there's a crib and a rocking chair inside, but otherwise it's pretty empty. The rocking chair is fun, but I wish the books were still there instead of in boxes in the hall. I like to play in that room and pretend it was a cave. Shopping was okay, mostly because Nene said she'd make me pillows too, because being a big sister is something to celebrate. This isn't true, of course, but I love it when my Nene calls me things. She makes all of our curtains, which is very special, especially because Grandma Jenkins says that good custom-made curtains are impossible to find these days. I kept telling her that Nene would be happy to make her some too, but she never remembers to call. But maybe she will when I show her the new pillows Nene is going to make for me, which will be amazing because I picked out fabric that's blue with sparkly penguins on it. I wasn't sure what to pick for the blob, mostly because I still don't want it moving into my house, but my Nene found white fabric with ladybugs on it, which I like. After the store, we went to Chinatown for lunch, which is always great. Nene orders my favorite foods and we eat with chopsticks. I love chopsticks, though they took me a while to learn how to use, but now I'm excellent at them. And Nene is very proud. While we waited for our food, we took the chopsticks out of their paper wrappers and folded the paper back and forth like a fan to make a chopstick holder. After we ate, we got bowls of sweet soup made of beans for dessert, which I was allowed to slurp. In fact, no one minds if you slurp your soup in Chinatown, which I can't do at home, and no one cares if your elbows are on the table. My Grandma Jenkins is very concerned about this. There are some special rules you do have to learn, though. For example, when the check comes, all the grown-ups have to fight over who's going to pay, which is funny to watch. And you can never put extra soy sauce on your food. I love mostly everything about Chinatown. I love the sound of Chinese, even though I don't understand it. I love the fish with big heads and wide eyes and that swim in the tank by the door, and I love the food, which comes on big streaming plates that we put in the middle of the table and share. Today, though, just as my Nene and I sat down, a waiter walked by with a plate of something familiar for another table, something that I used to love, but don't anymore. I haven't thought about it in a long time. My Nene saw it, too, and looked at me with her eyebrows raised and a question on her face, but I said, "No, thank you." Now I'm home and my mom is working at her desk. I'm lying on the fuzzy rug next to her because I can keep her company on the condition that I work too and don't talk or bother her. I've been pretty good at this so far and only interrupted her once to ask if she ever lies on the rug because it's so comfortable. And when she said no, to ask her why not, and maybe a third time to tell her about how someday I'll have a desk of my own, because all serious writers do, but I'll also have a fuzzy rug like this one because I love it so much. But that's it. At first I wasn't sure I'd write about this afternoon other than the rug, but I can't stop thinking about Chinatown or that plate. They have a story all their own, and this story happened when my hair was just long enough for bows but still too short for pigtails, when I went to a place called Preschool. Preschool's a fun place. Your mom drops you off in the morning and you're a big girl about it. But really you don't want her to go because even though you're brave and have a stomachache and pneumonia and leprosy and will miss her, but once you've hung up your backpack and put your lunchbox in your cubby, you'll feel better. Plus, Miss Jill is there to give you a hug and say, "Why don't we go play with the puppets?" And afterwards you forget about your stomachache and pneumonia because preschool is mostly great. However, there's one drawback to preschool. Other kids. I found this out one day when we were sitting around the sharing rug, which was a rug decorated with letters of the alphabet, where we took turns going around in a circle and saying our favorite thing. On this particular day, Miss Jill asked us to share our favorite foods. It was an easy question, and I was excited to answer because if you can't get excited about food, then what else is there? I had a big smile on my face when I shared my answer, too, because sharing was my favorite part of the day, and I loved thinking about my favorite food, which my Nene always ordered, especially for me when we were in Chinatown. So I said, "Snails." "What?" shrieked a girl with long pigtails. "Snails," I said, confused that she hadn't understood the first time. "But what do you eat?" another boy said, and didn't even look embarrassed that he hadn't been listening. "Snails. Like with shells?" a boy with a pipsqueak voice asked. In the literary words, this is what's known as a tough crowd. I looked at Miss Jill because they all clearly had some sort of brain fever that made you forget animal names and probably needed to go to the hospital. But Miss Jill looked confused, not worried, like she was putting on a brave face before leaving to call the ambulance. So I put on a brave face too. "Yes," I said gently. "Ew," they all said. This wasn't the reaction I was expecting. "Now, guys," Miss Jill cut in, "that isn't very nice. I'm sure Cilla can explain." I looked at her surprised. Had she caught the brain sickness too? "Explain what?" I asked, but my voice had suddenly gotten a bit smaller and higher, and I had a feeling in my stomach like I'd done something wrong. "What do you mean by snails? You don't eat real snails, right? Maybe candy ones?" "Nope," I whispered, wishing it wasn't my turn anymore. "Just real snails." "Oh," Miss Jill said, "how interesting. Where do you even get those?" Chinatown, I said, my voice all funny. Oh, Miss Jill said again. Well, thank you for sharing, Cilla. Ryan, why don't you share next? And then the conversation was over, but the other kids were giggling and my face was burning, and I suddenly didn't like sharing time as much as I used to. When my dad picked me up from school that afternoon, I didn't know I was still thinking about it, but when he said, "You're awfully quiet today, Cilla. Everything okay?" I found myself asking, "Dad, are we Chinese?" Yes, sweetie, we are." My dad pushed his glasses higher on his nose, which is what he does whenever he's thinking or nervous. "I'm Chinese, and your Nene and your Yeye are Chinese, and you're half Chinese." "Oh," I said. I'd know this, I guess, but I'd never really thought about it before. And then something else occurred to me. But does being half Chinese mean that I'm not really Chinese? "No," my dad said firmly. "It means that you are Chinese, but you are also something else. You're as Chinese as me and your Nene and Yeye. But you're also Caucasian, like your mom, which means you get to be both things, which is very special." I had to think about this for a while. "Okay," I said finally. "But Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. I don't think I like snails anymore. The next time we go to Chinatown, my Nene ordered snails, even though I didn't want them. And when I had a bite, because Mom and Dad insisted, I decided I didn't like them." "Ew, gross," I said. My mom said, "But Cilla, you love snails." My dad said, "How about you try another bite?" But I said no, because suddenly the taste had become something bad, though I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to hurt my Nene's feelings. My Nene looked at me for a moment, not like she was angry, but like she was trying to figure something out. "This happens with children," she said, finally. "Face change, here." She called over the waiter. A few minutes later, a plate of something hot and delicious smelling and new came to our table. "Bamboo hearts," she said. "Try." They were flat, soft vegetables that came on top of a pile of steaming hot spinach. I poked at them with my chopsticks. They smelled good, and they didn't seem like something that anyone at preschool would call gross, no matter how little imagination they might have. I took a bite. "Yum," I said. "Yay," my dad said. "I want to try some," my mom said. "A favorite?" my Nene asked. "Yes," I smiled back. "It's my favorite, too," she said. "Much better than snails. It's a very special grown-up food." "Wow," I exclaimed. This was a big deal. "Also," I said, "do you know that we're both Chinese?" "Yes," my Nene replied, patting my hand with her soft, papery one. "Have some more." Bamboo hearts are called saksang in Chinese, and I get them every time I go to Chinatown, including today. They're delicious, and my Nene always gives me the last piece, even when I say I'm too full, which is very nice of her, since they're her favorite too. But I never had snails again, which is maybe a little sad. Or at least, that's how I felt suddenly at lunch today when I saw that plate of snails go by. I think my Nene understood, though. When I said no and got quiet, she took my hand and asked me to tell her more about my book. Nene didn't know what a bestseller was, so I had to explain that it's a book you write if you want to be famous. Everyone will buy it because it sells the best, obviously. "Yeah," she said when I told her. "I know," I said with a big smile. "It'll be great." And then, even though we were just talking about books, she said no matter how busy things got with the baby, she and my Yeye would always have time to play with me and to listen to my stories. After lunch, she just surprised me with an order of saksang just for me, which came wrapped in a small container to take to school for lunch the next day. This was very exciting because I've never had saksang all to myself. Plus, when I brought leftovers from Chinatown to school for lunch last year, which I was kind of nervous to do, Colleen tried them and loved them. And if she and my Nene love something, it means it is definitely and officially can't be gross. So tomorrow, Colleen and I will be able to share saksang, and I bet she'll even let me have one of the chocolate cookies her mom packs in the special dessert pocket of her lunchbox, which means that this chapter can come to a happy, delicious end. And we are starting Chapter 5, Kindergarten and Other Tragedies. When you're upset, you're supposed to use your words to say why. My mom and dad tell me this all the time. Though every once in a while when they yell, my mom says, "For heaven's sake, Nathan, use your words." So I think it's something they have to work on too. But sometimes when you're sitting at recess by yourself and life is awful and your best friend hates you and you're thinking that maybe your shoulder that you should move somewhere far away like Alaska or Zanzibar, and you spilled milk at lunch and now your socks are making a squishy sound? It can be very hard to find the words you need. Now, you'd think that being a literary genius would make me excellent at expressing myself. Of course, sometimes it does. For example, I've used my words to call the baby in my mom's stomach Blobzilla, even though my parents have already picked out its name. They keep saying that it's not acceptable to call my little sister the Blob or any of the other excellent names I've come up with. Whatever happens, though, I won't call the new baby by the name my parents have picked. I hate it. In fact, I hate it so much, I won't write it down here, so there. But sometimes being a future author extraordinaire doesn't help with words at all, especially when you're upset, like yesterday when I found out some terrible news about the Blob, even worse than knowing that it's coming at all. I've mostly been trying to forget about the Blob over the past few weeks. Its room is slowly getting decorated, and I'll admit that the pillows my nanny made look very nice, though my penguin pillows are much better. But otherwise, not much has happened with it, and I hadn't wanted to talk about it, and it's been fun pretending like nothing's going to change. So when my mom came back from a doctor's appointment and asked me to sit down on the couch with her, I hoped it would be about something completely unrelated to the Blob. Maybe she wanted to talk about painting the house purple. I'm always pushing for this. Or buying a pony. This too. Or quitting her job to open up an ice cream store, which would be great, and I'd visit every day. But then she said, Cilla, I need to tell you something, in a serious voice, and I knew I wouldn't like this conversation. The doctors did some tests to make sure the baby's healthy, which it is, my mom went on, but they realized they got the due date wrong, which means the baby's going to be coming a bit later than we thought. This means that if the baby takes a while, there's a chance it's going to be born just before school starts around your birthday. It took me a minute to understand what she meant. I wanted to let you know, sweetheart. My mom went on, there's a very good chance that this baby will be born before then, and even if it's born close to your birthday, it will still be your special day. But I tried to find my words. It was very hard. But it won't be born on my birthday, right? It's really unlikely, my mom said, really. But that wasn't a good answer, because the only good answer to that question is no. My mom asked if I wanted to talk, and for once, the answer to that question also was no. Because how do you find the right words, the words to say how unfair it is that the Blob with the terrible name is not only taking your favorite food and your parents and your grandparents and the room you used to play cabin, but now it wants your birthday too? My mom was still trying to talk about my feelings this morning while we walked to the bus, but I didn't want to. In fact, all I wanted to do was talk to Colleen about what my mom had told me, because Colleen always knows what to say and is on my side. And I hoped she'd tell me that the Blob is awful, which would be nice to hear. But then things got even worse. When Colleen got on the bus, something was different. She wasn't smiling like usual, and she didn't say hi or Cilla or I have the best story to tell you or any of the things that she normally does when I see her in the morning. Instead, she sat down next to me with a small sigh. Hi, Colleen, I said quickly. I have the worst news. And I told her about the Blob, and I waited for her to tell me it was going to be okay. But she didn't. Instead, she just crossed her arms and made a sighing sound. Isn't that the worst thing ever? I prodded. No, Colleen said suddenly in an exasperated voice. It's not. I was surprised, and the bottom of my eyes got hot and itchy, and I didn't know what to say or what I'd done wrong. Sorry, Colleen said after a minute. It's just my grandpa called last night. My grandma fell and hurt her hip. Oh, I said. She's okay, Colleen went on, but she has to go to the hospital and have an operation. Oh, I said again, and I wanted to say something more, but I didn't know what, and I wanted to make everything better for Colleen, but I didn't know how. And what did it even mean to fall and break a hip? And the word hospital made my stomach do a flip, and Colleen was looking at me like she expected something, so I said, oh, again, quietly. And then there was a longer pause, and I tried to find something to say to make everything okay. But before I could, Colleen looked away and said, she'll be fine, in a short, funny voice. But excuse me if I don't want to talk about the Blob again, she went on, with her arms crossed. You'll just have to deal with it on your own, and not be such a baby. And I still didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. We were quiet on the bus after that. We didn't play or talk like we usually do, and I couldn't look at Colleen. I wanted to give her a hug, but I also wanted to tell her that she hadn't been fair. I spent the rest of the bus ride in all of circle time and math trying to think of things I should have said. Some of them were angry, but most of them were sorry. And then before we had a chance to talk, while I was paired with Alien Face McGee for reading, I looked across the room to where Colleen had been sitting with Tim number 1, and she was gone. I thought maybe she'd been abducted by aliens or trolls, which was more likely since Alien Face was with me the whole time. Actually, I sort of wish it had been trolls, because then I could have rescued her, and she'd be sorry that she'd ever said anything mean, and she'd know I cared about her and her grandma. But that's not what happened. Instead, when I asked Ms. Bloom where Colleen was, she said that Colleen had a stomachache and was waiting with the nurse for her mom to pick her up. Miss Bloom looked surprised too and said, "Oh, I thought she told you, Cilla, because Colleen and I tell each other everything. But Colleen left without telling me. Colleen left without saying goodbye," which I guess means that Colleen doesn't want to be my friend anymore. So I'm sitting by the swings by myself writing. Alien Face invited me to play on the balance beam with him and Tim number 1, but I said no, because how could I play at a time like this? Also, Colleen loves balance beams, so it would make me think of her and be sad. I haven't been this upset or alone on the playground or terrible with my words for a long time, and sitting here feels a lot like it did the first time I found out that you can be really, really bad with your words. Literary genius or not, it all started in kindergarten. Kindergarten's a big deal. It's your first time at real school and your first time riding the bus. Plus, when I went to kindergarten, my hair was so long that for the first time in my life, it touched my shoulders. So I was happy about going to kindergarten right up till the morning. I had to get ready for the school bus for the first time. Then several things occurred to me. First, there would be older kids there. I have a strict policy against older kids. This is because, number 1, I worry they'll be mean. Number 2, I worry they'll squish me on purpose. And number 3, I worry they'll squish me by accident, even if they're not mean, because these things can happen. I was also reconsidering this bus business. Yes, it was yellow and exciting, but there would be older kids on it too. See above. I wouldn't know anyone, and what if I didn't know where to get off and accidentally stayed on for too long and ended up in another school or state or country and never found my way home? When my mom came upstairs and found me in my pajamas saying, "No thank you, Mommy," I've decided I don't want to go to kindergarten. She was as sympathetic as she could have been. In fact, she wasn't sympathetic at all. I'm sorry, she wasn't as sympathetic as she could have been. In fact, she wasn't sympathetic at all. But when I finally came downstairs, dressed and ready to go, I told her my real fear, the actual thing that was the scariest about kindergarten, even worse than big kids. But I asked my mom, what if no one likes me, and I don't make any friends? And my mom knelt down so our faces were very close, and she held out her arms so I could cuddle into her shoulder, which is my favorite thing. And she said, "Cilla Lee Jenkins, you are someone worth knowing. So if anyone doesn't want to be your friend, they're missing out." She gave me a piggyback ride to the bus stop, though I got down before the bus came so everyone would know I was a big girl. I waved goodbye to my parents as the bus pulled away, and I think Mom was catching a cold because she kept blowing her nose and wiping her eyes on my dad's shirt. The bus wasn't so bad. The big kids didn't bother me, and I met Lou, who's still my bus driver and very nice, and I promised that he promised he'd tell me when to get off the bus. School, however, was a different story. My kindergarten teacher was Miss Cotton. She had bright white hair that curved in a ball around her face, just like a cotton ball, so her head matched her name, which was impressive. Miss Cotton smiled a lot, but didn't seem all that happy about anything. I decided that I didn't think I liked Miss Cotton that first morning when we played a getting to know you game and took turns saying our names. "Priscilla Lee Jenkins," I said nearly in a whisper. "Huh?" Miss Cotton said, finding me on her attendance sheet. "What an unusual name." And then, before I could tell her that I wanted to be called Cilla, not Priscilla, she said in a loud voice, "Class, in case you couldn't hear, this is Priscilla. She's just a bit shy." And she moved on to the next student, and no one else seemed to have the problem called shy, and some of the kids even said funny things that made the class laugh. And I didn't like that everyone thought I was quiet and boring and a Priscilla. I wanted to turn to Miss Cotton and say in a loud voice, "No, I'm not shy. I'm a future author extraordinaire." But I didn't. I did a lot of sitting by myself by the swings during those first few days of kindergarten. I tried to play with the other kids, but even though I built a block castle with a girl named Sophie and had a monkey bar contest with Tim number 1, I was always thinking and worrying about what to say. So when I played block castles, I wanted to make up stories about the people who lived inside them, but decided against it. And Sophie looked kind of bored and went to play with the bouncing balls instead. And when I played with Tim number 1 on the monkey bars, he pretended to be a monkey. So I began to be an elephant who used her trunk to do monkey bar tricks. But then Tim number 1 got confused because he said monkeys and elephants don't do the same thing. I wanted to explain that no, I'd made up a story about an elephant and a monkey who trained together at the circus and were famous for their daring deeds. Only I suddenly didn't know if I should share my story with him. So I just said quietly, "Oh, okay, I'll be a monkey too." I didn't have a very good time for the rest of that recess, and I think Tim number 1 thought I was weird, and I definitely didn't seem like someone worth knowing. So even though my dad said, "Cilla, sweetie, at least give it a week," I despaired, as writers do. The only person in kindergarten who didn't make me feel quacky and nervous inside was Miss Lynn, the kindergarten helper, who was in our classroom every other day. Miss Bloom reminds me of her. She had short hair that was brown and spiky and 2 earrings in one of her ears. She loved reading, and she told me that she used to make up stories about a platypus named pt1, who had adventures while she was at school. So I knew that Miss Lynn had a great imagination and an appreciation for excellent names. Also, she is very nice. It was Miss Lynn who would come check on me during snack time when I was sitting by myself. It was Miss Lynn who could tell me that she liked how I used pink for the sky instead of blue, because why not? It was Miss Lynn who told us about the book project. The book project should have been very exciting for me, since writing is my life's work and all. It went like this. We were writing a class book. Every student would write and illustrate 1 page, and your page would pick up where the last person's page left off. That meant that everyone would know a tiny bit of the story, but not the whole thing. We would take turns meeting with Miss Lynn so she could help us with our page and show us the page that came before. And then she'd put our books together over the weekend, and Miss Cotton would read it to the class on Monday, and it would be an exciting surprise for all of us. I wasn't sure about the whole group authorship thing, especially if Miss Cotton was involved, and I was right to worry, because when my turn for the book project came, not only did my page come after Billy Lane's, who between you and me is a very boring individual, but to top it all off, Miss Lynn was out sick that day, so Miss Cotton herself was going to help me write it. By this point, I knew I didn't like Miss Cotton, no matter how literal her hair was. And that fateful afternoon, when she called me up to her desk, my words vanished. Here's an account of what happened, told exactly how I remember it happening. This may not, however, be what Miss Cotton would remember happening, because there's a large part of the conversation that she didn't hear. Miss Cotton: "Well, Priscilla, here's what the page before yours, which Billy has written, is going to say. And then the cat had some milk because she was thirsty. Me on the inside. Is that it? Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Isn't that a nice place to build our page from? Me on the inside. No, it's actually very boring, just like Billy. Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "There are so many things you can imagine happening after just this 1 page." She looks at me like she's expecting something. Me on the inside. You don't get out much, do you? Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "So you think of what you'd like your page to say." Me on the inside. No. Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Don't worry, Priscilla, making stories is much harder than it looks." Me on the inside. Yes, I know, struggle with my art every day. Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "What do you usually do after you've had a drink?" Me on the inside. Pee is probably not the right answer. Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Well." Me on the inside. Wait, maybe pee is the right answer. Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Do you have a snack?" Me on the inside. Oh, I guess, though I wouldn't write a story about it. And me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Well, what if she was hungry? Maybe she wanted some food to go with the milk." Me on the outside. This book isn't going to be a bestseller, is it? Me on the outside. Silence. Miss Cotton: "Well, Priscilla." Me on the inside. Art is dead. Me on the outside, in a very small, quiet voice. Okay, she got a cookie, and then because she was very full and tired, she took a nap. Excellent! She writes it down on a big piece of paper. Well done. Now you can illustrate your page during free time. Me on the inside. Sigh. Me on the outside, very quietly. Okay. Exit Cilla Lee Jenkins, left stage. Stage left in despair. End scene. Despair is an excellent theme to end this chapter on. It's how I feel right now. I'm at home writing on my mom's office rug, and when I got off the bus this afternoon, I was in so much despair that I maybe started crying, even though I didn't want to, because that's just being a baby, just like Colleen said I was. And I told my dad about how Colleen's not my friend anymore, and I need to switch schools and go somewhere really far away like Alaska. And I said the wrong thing, and my feelings are hurt, and trolls would be better. Cilla, sweetie, my dad said after giving me hugs and having me take some deep breaths, and then asking me to tell the story in order with just the facts. Apparently it's confusing when you include the part about trolls. It sounds like Colleen is having a hard time right now, my dad went on. She shouldn't have said that, what she did, and I'm sure she knows you care about her. Tomorrow you two can apologize and talk about what happened. But that sounds like a conversation I don't know how to have, because it sounds like I need words that aren't just in my head or aren't just a part of the story. And I don't know if I have those.